Spoiler warning. The following discussion will contain spoilers. We recommend checking out the movie first, then coming back to hang with us. But if you don't care about that, glad to have you here. Alright, everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Real Review. My name's Kevin.
And I'm John.
And we are The Real Movie Guys. It's March, so that can only mean one thing. Real March Madness. It's a tale as old as time, Pixar versus Disney. In a brawl to end it all, we have selected 8 films from each studio. A total of 16 movies will battle head-to-head for superiority. On today's episode, we'll be taking a look at Pixar's WALL-E. In the distant future, a small waste-collecting robot inadvertently embarks on a space journey that will ultimately decide the fate of mankind. Now, John, going into WALL-E, did you have any, interest when this movie was announced? What were some of your early thoughts, back in the day? We're going way back into the way back machine of 2008. What were some of your early thoughts on WALL-E?
My early thoughts was I was not going to watch WALL-E.
Really?
I don't think that I actually completed watching WALL-E.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 3 years ago was the first time I actually watched it. Everything that I heard about it and everything that I thought it was going to be just was nothing that really interested me either.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact I kept hearing that it was a silent film too kind of drove me away from it more.
Let's get this out of the way right off the bat. WALL-E is a combination of two very strange things. And I give Pixar so much credit for this because I've critiqued them in the past when we've been talking about their movies about the Pixar formula doing the same thing over and over again. What's this doing while you're not looking? That whole thing. I feel like Pixar's kind of not been in a rut, but they've clicked to the main staple of their formula. So doing WALL-E, I give them a lot of credit. WALL-E is a combination of the silent film meets 2001: A Space Odyssey. And I don't know what nightmare someone had to put those two things together, but sure enough they did. And in my opinion, WALL-E might be one of the best Pixar movies ever made.
It's a big praise from you, I feel like.
That's a huge praise from me. You know it is in a lot of ways. How does WALL-E work is the real question you should ask yourself. Because this movie, it starts off for, maybe 40 minutes almost? It's a silent film. There's zero dialogue, if not just some beeps, boops, and maybe a little word here or there that might not even actually be a word come out of the characters' mouths.
One thing that we've seen from Pixar a lot is they really know how to make you feel with a character, and I feel like definitely in this movie you definitely feel with the character. Though you don't necessarily understand him in the beginning, you feel with him and what he's going through.
Right, and what is that accredited to? In my opinion, the animation. Pixar's taken everything they've learned prior to this movie. They studied silent film just to try and capture this right, because you can tell what WALL-E's doing or what WALL-E's feeling just by the sheer movement of his body. Whether he likes something, he's intrigued about something, he doesn't like it, he's disgusted. You can tell what's on that character's face, and what's even better, the character doesn't have a face. He just has eyes. They really took the idea that when you look into the soul of someone's eyes, you can see what they're feeling. Pixar literally did that with this movie. And if that's not to be commended, I don't know what is. They took so many different silent film theory and crafted it into this film. It's astounding to me.
It's very breathtaking to watch, too.
Breathtaking is the best word because not even just the sheer animation, but the actual visual that they have in this movie. When this movie opens up, it's photorealistic. I've never seen such beautiful literal trash in my life. This movie made me say, wow, that trash is absolutely beautiful. I wish I could go into my own garbage can and say that, because it doesn't look as good as the trash that's in this movie. They really nail it. They nail an atmosphere, a feeling. But one thing I want to touch on real quick is you mentioned earlier that you heard about this movie, right? This wasn't something you were jumping out to go see. You heard through the grapevine, oh, it's a silent film, it's sci-fi, yada, yada, yada. You heard it's really good. That's really kind of all you heard about this movie. That being said, I think there is a daunting task when you go to watch this movie. And it also brings up something we'll talk about a little bit later, too, is who is this film really for? Is it for the film buffs like us, the film critics? Is it for the more adult audiences? Is it for a older generation? But then the film kind of attempts to answer that, in my opinion, where the first half of this movie is totally for the adults. The kids, I think, will get enjoyment of it, but at points you do start to lose the risk of kids being disinterested. Would you agree with that early on in the movie?
Yeah, definitely.
It's a long scene to have no dialogue and just go by simple interactions with a beautifully composed score, I might add. Oh my god, the score is a whole nother animal in this film. We're developing the character. We're learning about the character WALL-E. It's amazingly entertaining, especially for an adult, because we're able to understand all the nuance that they're going for. I think it does touch children to a degree. Children understand action, I think, more than they understand dialogue, so I can see how this movie can connect with the younger generation. But due to that lack of action, I do think it could be a daunting task for them to get invested in. So, like I said, what this movie decides to do is they course correct midway through this movie, and it turns into something else. We had a silent film, the whole start of the movie, and then suddenly we have this little sci-fi adventure in a space station. While it can feel kind of jarring at a point, because it kind of does, I think, in some way. I could feel like there's like a tonal shift. We went from this like very serious, almost artsy experiment with the beginning of the film, and then we have a classic Pixar movie right at the end with, you know, talking characters. Not WALL-E, WALL-E never speaks, but we're introduced to other characters and this whole space post-apocalyptic setup. But I think that's what reels the kids in more, and what this ultimately becomes is a love letter to sci-fi. This movie has so much love and admiration for the sci-fi genre. It made me smile inside. I'd be a liar if I said it didn't. From the fact they have literally Sigourney Weaver voicing the ships.
Caution, rogue robots. Caution, rogue robots. Caution, rogue robots.
WALL-E!
You have her voice, you know, calling out all the callbacks. Sigourney Weaver, literally my alien queen right there. And the fact that they have Otto is actually designed like the 2001 A Space Odyssey's HAL.
Otto, he found the plant. Fire up the hollow detector.
Not necessary, Captain. You may give it to Eve.
You know what? I should do it myself.
Captain. Sir, I insist you give me the plan.
They call back so much tributes. While the children aren't understanding it, it's giving them a little action and adventure so they have something to enjoy.
It's not like it's one of those stories where, like, you break it down into 3 different parts and you're like, oh, like, I can kind of understand how that would go together. It feels like it flows very well.
And I think a lot of that has to do with is what really carries this plot. I think more than just the story, the characterization. And there's not many characters in this movie. There's realistically, if you really want to get down to the nitty-gritty, there's 2 characters in this whole movie. Like 2 legitimate characters, WALL-E and Eve. And this movie commits to the fact that you're going to love these 2 characters. From the characterization of WALL-E, which we touched on earlier, you really get a sense of what he wants. Like, he's longing for something else. He's longing for a companionship. And you have Eve, she's sent to Earth to try and find life so they can eventually go back. She wants nothing to do with WALL-E, and then through a series of events, she loses her memory, but realizes WALL-E was taking care of her and he cares about her. She grows to love him and see him for who he is. It's funny that it's like a sci-fi romance now, too. One of my favorite actual scenes in this movie is when they're ejected from the space station.
WALL-E!
It's an amazing sequence, and it's really touching because, again, not much is said about these characters. It's all about what we're seeing. And that bond, that commitment, made me feel really committed to these characters more than I probably should have been. When we get towards the end of the movie and they have the, oh no, the main character is going to die scene, you know it's all going to work out. 99% of the time it usually does work out. But at the same time, you're left with, oh no, what if WALL-E doesn't make it? You're going to feel bad for Eve because she loves WALL-E and she's coming to love him. She finally realized her feelings. Starting to get a little bit of teary eyes. You know, it's starting to hit you. They really are using those Pixar emotions that they're so clever and known for to full effect in this movie. And again, WALL-E is just stupendous because of that characterization. It's a positive and a negative in a way. Some people may see it as like, well, there's not enough characters to really invest in this. I think by having a less amount of characters, they're able to focus all their attention and efforts into such this limited amount that we get the most maximum storytelling possible out of these characters. Because sometimes you find yourself spread thin. This movie's like, no, this is WALL-E's journey. This is what he's going through. This is what we're concerned about. Yeah, we got some other things we want to preach about later on, with more focus about what Wally's going through in his adventure. And it really shows that. And I think for the better part of the movie, that's very successful. This is another thing that I could see some seeing as like a positive or negative. The messaging. This movie really is about protecting Earth, and not even more so that, I think protecting legacy. I do feel it's a bit heavy-handed a little bit with its messaging, especially towards the latter end of the movie where we literally have, we have Wally and Eve, Adam and Eve restarting civilization. Yeah, it's a little heavy-handed, right? It is. We have to admit. But at the same time, I think it raises a lot of good discussion that kids need to see about how we're leaving things, right? What do you want to leave behind? Don't you want to leave something for the better behind when you're gone? Not to run away from that legacy. Humans, we wrecked the Earth, we left, and we're living the lives we're having now without realizing, oh, we probably should have took advantage of what we had and go back and fix it. But we never did. We were just kind of stuck in our sedentary lives, which this movie really loves to rub in everyone's face that, oh, a bunch of fat people that don't do anything. They really love humans in this movie, I'll tell you that. Again, while I think it's heavy-handed, I do think it's a good message. Yeah, definitely the whole legacy bit, but just being a simple protecting the Earth, valuing Mother Nature, I think there's a lot to that, and I think this movie has a great message. The movie really stays with you after you watch it, and I think it raises a lot of higher IQ conversations you could have with children. So the negatives. If Kevin, you love this movie so much, you must absolutely have nothing wrong with it. Not true. There's a couple things I think I'm noticing about Pixar too, so let's get into it real quick. The one thing I think does not work in this movie is the live action segment. This is the first Pixar movie that actually uses almost like a found footage type style for when they're telling the history of Earth and everything that happened. They have the rest in peace, Fred Willard in this film as the president of Earth, and while they're leaving, while they're doing this, he's giving his presentation. They run it like a newsreel when Wally finds it, and we find out everything that happened. I don't think it works. It feels way too disjointed for this movie. I don't understand why they couldn't have just animated it. Maybe they were trying to go for like, oh, this could happen to you someday, and try to like scare people. Maybe that was like the whole messaging trying to get out to kids. I think that was unsuccessful.
Yeah, I don't think it worked.
To me, it stands out too much, and that actually goes into my other big complaint with this movie is I don't think the human designs fit in this world. And I'm starting to see that a little bit more and more with how good Pixar movies are becoming, how amazing they're looking. We compliment the whole atmosphere of this movie and the beautiful scenery, the sculpted designs, and the landscape. And then you have these human characters that look cartoony against these photorealistic surfaces. Now, does that off-put you at all, John? Because it's starting to. I'm starting to realize it, because I think Pixar is, not that they should have photorealistic people, but I'm feeling a little bit of a disconnect starting with these kind of the human characters versus the worlds they're living in.
I agree with you. It hasn't gotten to me yet, but it's almost kind of like one of those things too. Pixar does so many things good that you would hope that they could get that right too.
Right.
But it just seems like they fall flat on that front.
And again, it's tough because you don't want to say it's bad, because I don't think it is. I think, it still looks fine for the most part. It reminds me I'm watching an animated movie, which I feel like they're trying so hard to tell you, hey, look how realistic our movie is. Oh, we're so amazing. We're so fantastic. Oh, by the way, here's some animated people. Well, you just went back and reminded me again. I feel like it's a no-win situation for them. Do they keep the movie in a fantastical world where it doesn't look realistic? Or do they shift everything, including the human characters, to make them look photorealistic? That might come across a little creepy, though, in a kid's animated movie. I feel like that's the current 2021 with Pixar. I feel like they haven't found that balance yet. The last critique, and I mentioned it earlier, and I think it's true, and that's why it bears repeating, is I think a lot of children are going to lose interest in this movie. They'll find something later on, but your children have to get to that point first. They have to get through that first 40 minutes of the movie. And maybe not even children, some adults too, I think. I think there's definitely an argument to be made that silent film had its time. It was good for then. Maybe it hasn't aged as well now. Maybe it's not something we're looking for. I've seen a lot of people say this, and I can agree with it. I love the movie that was made. Don't get me wrong. I think it's a masterpiece. But this beginning of the movie ultimately can feel like a short film. Minus, the cliffhanger ending that they put at the start of this film with, Eve getting taken back to the ship. This could have just been a short film. It didn't really need to be a full feature-length movie. And maybe it works better as a fun silent film to animation experiment than it does work as a whole movie. Not saying I agree with that. I'm just saying that I've seen conversation and I could listen to that conversation. I could definitely see something for that.
Yeah, but I think you'd be missing out on a lot.
Oh, I agree too. I do. Like I said, sometimes a fun experiment doesn't need to be lengthened out. But in this way, I think they had a good idea for maybe a fun experiment, but they lengthened it out correctly and gave us something fun and unique at the end of the movie. This movie did a really good job. So, John, I think we're at that point where we're going to give our final scores. I'm going to give WALL-E an A.
WALL-E!
This movie's fantastic. Is it perfect? No. There is some argument to be made with the pacing, some of the design as far as it being a silent film to almost another movie ultimately, but you can't ignore the work that's done in this movie. From the animation to the character design, the sci-fi, everything that's been blended and beautifully crafted in this movie, it'll stand the test of time. I think WALL-E has a lot to say, maybe a bit heavy-handed, but ultimately, a fantastic film. John, where do you stand with this?
I give WALL-E a B+. I feel like it's a good movie, and it's definitely got its strong points. I think you're right, though, too. It does probably take a lot of people some time to get into this movie, with the 40 minutes of it being silent, because people nowadays just like want stuff like quick and now and stuff. But I also think that this movie is done so well that it's one of those movies that you can go back and watch a bunch of times, and you can see how much effort and time that they put into this movie, that you can still see it now and how beautiful it still looks.
No, I think this movie, again, like I'll reiterate, it will stand the test of time. WALL-E, it's an interesting take for Pixar. I want to really commend, you didn't do the same thing, and you made me proud. This is by far one of my favorite Pixar movies. Not my favorite Pixar movie, we actually didn't talk about that, but it's definitely up there. I think WALL-E is a fun ride, admire it for its artistic ability, admire it for just being a good movie. It's going to have a tough battle, though. It's going to be facing off Beauty and the Beast. Oofa.
Ooh, a tale as old as time.
Seriously. John, where can the people find us at home?
You can find us over on YouTube. The Real Movie Guys over on YouTube. Go over there and like our channel, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you get notified when we put out stuff. You can also follow us on Twitter, at The Real Movie Guy on Twitter. You can also follow us over on Instagram. And you can also listen to us on many podcasting platforms, such as...
Yes, for your listening pleasure, we are also available in podcast form at iTunes, Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcast, Overcast, Breaker, Radio Public, and Pocket Cast. Be sure to give us a listen at any of those fine places. If you go there right now, hey, greatly appreciate it. Just search out Real Movie Guys. We should pop right up. Thank you all again so much for joining us for this episode of The Real Review. My name's Kevin, that guy over there, he's John. We are The Real Movie Guys. Real guys, real movies, real thoughts. The battle rages on as Real March Madness, Disney versus Pixar continues. We will catch you next time.